So we're continuing to talk about Richard Foster's book, The Streams of Faith that flow together to become the mighty river of Christianity. And we've been looking this week at the social justice stream. If justice is about being just and making the world's systems just, then what is just? If righteousness is about being right and making the world's systems right, then what is right? How do you determine what is right and what is wrong in a given situation? Politically, we deeply disagree about this. Republicans and Democrats often think exact opposite things are right, and these can change over time and place. It's really interesting that when you think about issues like abortion or gay rights or immigration, things keep changing on them, but ultimately the Republicans and the Democrats both think they're being just, both think they're being right, and yet will argue opposite sides of the issue. Socially, we deeply disagree about this as well. Society opens us up to all sorts of different things to be right, and these things also change through time and place. What was right 10 years ago is wrong today, and what's right today may be wrong in a decade. And we have to acknowledge that there's a difference between opinions and ethics. We may do things differently and disagree, but the big question is, how do you determine what is right? Now, as Christians, we claim the Bible as our source of right and wrong, and yet even there, we disagree deeply about it. And that's human. That's natural. Seldom do we argue against the Bible. Within the covenant, at least, our arguments are about interpretation. The real danger becomes when we attach ourselves, whether it's religiously or politically or socially, to a certain side of an argument without any knowledge about it. We hear an opinion. We say, that sounds good. And we make it our own without reading about it or learning about it or having any experience with it. Yesterday, we talked about living out the social justice stream of Christianity. We call it the compassionate life. And step one of that life, we said yesterday, was to acknowledge that God can do amazing things through you. See, without that first step, the enemy will just keep whispering in your ear, yeah, absolutely, God can do amazing things, but not through you, so you don't need to try. That is one of Satan's great whispers. That's the first step, is to acknowledge that God can use you to do amazing things. The second step is what we've been talking about so far in this video blog. We need to become knowledgeable about injustice. Richard Foster uses this term, and what he means is the geographical sense. It means we need to become knowledgeable about justice globally, but I think it applies in a local sense as well. So let me give you a couple of sub-points that I've created underneath this main point that Richard Foster brings to us. Some sub-points to help us get the facts, as Foster puts it. The first thing we can do in order to get the facts is to widen your viewership. Widen your viewership. Many of us get pretty entrenched in one newscast or one channel or one website for our news. And if we don't do that, then most of the time we will focus all of ourselves on all the different channels that bring our preferred angle to the events of the world. And that limits us. People call that the echo chamber, where you speak into it your particular point of view, and other people who agree just speak it right back to you, and it gets louder and louder, and pretty soon, why can't anybody think the exact same way I do? It doesn't make any sense, because I'm, of course, right. But to learn truth, real truth, we need multiple viewpoints on the world, on injustice, on the things going on around us. It's why we have two eyes. And that's how we get a 3D perspective, right? Cover up one eye and try to walk around a room. With one perspective, things are extremely limited. With two perspectives, we get a whole new way of seeing things. I argue that that's why we have 4 Gospels, to give us lots of different perspectives. And frankly, it's why we have 17 prophetic writings in Scripture. It's because we get a lot of different takes on what it is God has to say about injustice. So as you seek to learn about the world, I want to encourage you to get multiple perspectives. Widen your viewership. The second subpoint of this is this: widen your viewership. No, I didn't make a mistake. It's just another aspect on that same thing. That sounds just like the first one, but this is a little different. Did you know that there is justice going on outside of Lake County? That there's injustice outside of Chicagoland and outside of Illinois and even outside of the United States? When Foster tells you to get the facts about injustice, he means to consider the whole world. Let me ask you this. Do you know what's going on right now in Bahrain? Do you know what's going on in Germany? Let me ask you this. How are human rights lawyers doing in China right now? Don't guess. Have you read? Do you know? I know it's really hard to keep track of the injustice and sinful systems just here in the United States, let alone around the globe. But nobody ever said that living social justice would be easy. In fact, nobody promised Christianity would be easy. These things are not pastimes for us. This is the very call of God to each and every one of us. So though I try to read critically, because you can't just read something and take it for absolute truth, I do try to read through numerous websites so that I can get my news from numerous viewpoints. I always take a look at CNN and at Fox, but I also look at BBC. I read Al Jazeera news, and then oftentimes some random articles that come through different news feeds. So while those are still limited, other people will have other collections. This at least gets my head outside of the United States, outside of my particular belief bubbles about opinions, and into a grander way of seeing the issues around us. Subpoint 3, this is our last one. Join a racial righteousness small group here at Libertyville Covenant Church. I have learned a ton about the sin of racism through our reading and our watching and our discussing together on Thursday nights. And being good covenanters, we always have to acknowledge that all of our reading and our theology and our study needs to happen in community, even if that community is via Zoom for now. We have a Zoom group that meets Thursdays, and we have a live group that meets Thursdays, both of them meeting at 6:30. So if you want to get a closer look at a specific issue of social justice, specifically in this case racism, come and join us. I guarantee you'll learn a whole lot too. So let me wrap this up. I've been holding a Chinese proverb in my head whenever I can, and I really have come to appreciate it. It says this: better to light a candle than to shout at the darkness. What this means is that it's better to do one small thing than to complain about the big problem. Oh, but Pastor Steve, it's just so much easier to just complain about it. And the problems are so huge. What could I do? What you can do is just light a single candle. Give a minute. How about this? Give 1 minute and $1 to one of our social justice ministries for every hour that you watch on the screen. What about that? Just 1 minute and $1 for 1 hour. How about coming to our Thursday night racial righteousness groups? And there you can learn about our plans to collectively work together to light some candles about injustice. And of course, as we've said, widen your news intake. Take the time to learn about injustice from lots of different angles rather than just turning away from it in fear. I know that the injustice of the world is terrifying, but this is where it becomes so important for us to acknowledge together that God is in control, that God has got this, and that God is calling us to do something about it. Foster says, get the facts, and that's step 2. Tomorrow, we're going to look at step 3 and see what that has to say for us. So, hope I see you then. Goodbye.